republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Gray?
Present.
Trustee Caprio?
Present.
Trustee Rogers?
Present.
Trustee Sweet?
Present.
Trustee Nancy?
Present.
Trustee Gary?
Present.
Mayor Yovich?
Present. Are there any amendments to the agenda? I want to take H2 off, and we'll table it for this meeting. Hopefully we'll get the rest of the season, but the next one, and we can discuss them. Is there any other, everyone okay with tabling?
Yep.
Who made the motion?
You did.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 23rd, 2019 village board meeting?
I so move.
Second. Discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'm not seeing if I was not here.
Okay. Next is reports and communications from the mayor and other officers. Will County Division of Transportation public meeting. The Will County Division of Transportation is hosting an open house meeting at Lockport's High School East Campus in the East Gym on Thursday, March 21st, which is tomorrow, to review alternative alignments for the Caton Farm Bruce Road project. Information on the project may be found at www.csb-study.com. All interested persons are invited to attend a public information meeting at any time between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. If anyone doesn't know about the Caton Farm Road, they want to put another bridge over 355. They want to bring it down. Their main goal is to bring it down Cedar, which would make it extremely busy with the two schools there. They're spending $660 million on something that they can get for free. Unfortunately, just a stay on that one. But if anyone wants to attend it, please come by and hear what they're saying. I'm happy to announce that the village was named the 2018 Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation in honor of our commitment to effective urban forest management. This is the 10th year that the village has received this recognition by meeting the program's requirements. So, thanks to that group. And we'll go with the trustees, and we'll start with Trustee Gray.
No reports tonight, Mayor.
Trustee Gray, Trustee Trachey,
I don't think I know report.
Trustee Burritt.
No report this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. Trustee Rogers.
No.
Thank you. Trustee Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting for the Environment Committee. Please save the date for the Homer Glen Community Cleanup Day on Saturday, April 27th. You can pick up litter in the parks, along the trails, around your neighborhood, or any other place where you see litter. More information will be available on the Facebook page under Homer Glen Community Cleanup, and then this is headed up by Ms. Sweet. The Environment Committee has an opening for a new member. Please contact the village at 708-301-0632. Our next Environment Committee meeting will take place on April 9th due to the elections being held on the 2nd. And at this moment, I would like to ask the board for consensus to have an interactive committee of the whole meeting with some Environment Committee members regarding a proposal and a presentation of the tree ordinance prior to the board meeting on April 24th. The reason why they didn't want it as a workshop, they wanted to be more interactive with the board as a committee of the whole. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are so I could go back to them for our next meeting.
I'm fine with that.
Good?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting on behalf of the Homer Community Festival Committee, we had a meeting last night. Festival dates have been set. They were set a long time ago as Thursday, June 20th through Sunday, June 23rd. We've been aggressively planning the fest with the new location being Heritage Park, and we do understand there's going to be a huge learning experience for us with the new location, but we feel with the great committee we have in place that we will make this a great event as always. We have decided on 7 food vendors for this year as opposed to 6, which we had last year, so we're adding an additional food vendor this year. The lineup of the bands has been set with a variety of music each night. Thursday, June 20th will be the fireworks night. We won't talk about a rain date because we don't want it to rain that day, but we will have one at some point. Friday, June 21st, we're still planning Special Needs Day from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. Those children, Homer residents with special needs, we allow them to enjoy their time at the carnival and enjoy the day there for a couple hours at least. So we're going to be putting word out about that very soon to the local school districts and whatnot to hope we have a well-attended event. We have many sponsors who've joined this year, also looking for more sponsors for anybody out there who wishes to sponsor the Homer Community Fest. Mecca passes at some point will be mentioned and will be on sale as well as they have been in prior years. Always looking for youth volunteers, adult volunteers as well. You can contact the Village Hall at 708-301-0632 or the Homer Township Road District. They can direct you to the proper people as well, 708-301-0246. Also, we have a website, homerfest.com, that is currently being reconstructed. We have a landing page there now to allow for just general information regarding the fest. So we look forward to a successful and enjoyable time the weekend of June 20th through the 23rd. We hope you can join us, and there'll be more communication as we get closer. And that will conclude my report.
Thank you, Trustee Caprio. Next will be Village Clerk.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify in your report, Mr. Mayor, you said the bridge over 355. I think you meant Displays River.
Displays River, yes.
The early voting has begun at the Township Office from 9 to 3:30, Monday through Friday, and that goes through the 29th. And the annual business registration process is almost coming to an end. And next week out will go the liquor and tobacco renewals, and that should be done by the end of April. Thank you.
Thank you. Village Attorney.
Very briefly, Mayor, I believe that earlier we talked about an amendment to the agenda, and you mentioned H1. I believe that it's actually L1. So just to clarify that, in terms of the tabling L1 rather than it was H2.
Yeah, that was one of the sides.
Are you doing both? Or just-
Are you tabling the approval of the bills or tabling the discussion?
No, we'll get to those two.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I think when you get to the consent agenda, you can approve it. H2 is already off. You can approve it separately, and then you get L1. You can address the tabling of that.
Okay.
Great. That's all right. Thank you.
So that's it.
So are we putting each two back in?
Yeah.
Because we had motion and vote on it.
You can actually just approve it separately. You can do the consent agenda and then take H2 separately.
Okay, public safety officials.
No report, Mayor.
Thanks, Lieutenant.
Thanks, sir.
Assistant Village Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to report that the village is seeking to fill 3 full-time seasonal maintenance worker positions. The position requires physical labor and will assist in maintaining the grounds of the public property. Applicants must be 18 years of age, have a high school diploma or GED. The pay rate will be $10.50 per hour, and the individuals will be working approximately 40 hours per week from June to October. Interested applicants must complete the job application found on the village's website. If there are any questions, you can contact the Village Hall at 708-301-0632. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Management Analyst.
Thank you, Mayor. This afternoon, we resumed our bi-weekly construction update meetings regarding the active core project. This was our first meeting since December 12th. It was basically just to talk with the contractor about the timeline for the project as they start back up construction. The main item that is kind of holding the bulk of the work is waiting on the asphalt plants to open up. They kind of require upper 30s and 40-degree temps in order to open up and kind of have the demand to open up those plants. And that will kind of kickstart a bulk of the remaining work in the active core. Furnishings such as benches and planters have already been delivered, so those can be installed once the paths and asphalt are installed. And then once the asphalt rests for 2 weeks, then they can move forward with the color coding and other items that need a little higher temperature. And that should be, the plant should open ideally by mid-April.
Thank you, ma'am. Next would be public comment. First would be Lynn McGarry.
Hello, I'm just here to make sure you all save the date for the Mayor's State of the Village Luncheon Address. That's Tuesday, April 16th at Donofos. I know the village turns out for this, and I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate it. So the New Heritage Corridor Business Alliance is what's sponsoring it this year, and we hope it turns out to be the success that it's always been. So hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next would be Jim Bluestein. Did I get that right?
Gideon,
Gideon.
like the Bible. Good evening, Mayor, members of the Village Board. I'm Gideon Bluestein. I work locally for the Three Rivers Association of Realtors. And I'm actually here just to bring up an issue that's not on the agenda for tonight, but to try to get ahead a little bit at least of an issue. I noticed it was on the Finance Committee agenda. It has to do with creating a vacant property registration or updating the vacant property registration ordinance and entering into an agreement with a company named ProChamps. And the intent is really good, right? We don't want to see problem properties. We want to get these properties back marketable, back on the market. Our concern, I've reviewed the ordinances that ProChamps has used in some other communities, and there's deeper layers of concern, but I want to stick to 3 minutes. One is that they define foreclosed and vacant properties really broadly. So it could very easily include somebody that's going through a tough time, they're in financial distress, and all of a sudden they're getting kicked while they're down, having to register. And I don't know what the fees would be set at with Glen, but we've seen fees as high as $600 a year. So that's one of the concerns. The second concern is really a practical concern, just in terms of how to get these properties back to market. And we have some expertise, local experts who, during the downturn, during the financial crash, this was their specialty, was managing these properties, getting them maintained, making sure that they were in good shape and could get brought back to market. And so my request tonight, and then I'll let you move on with the meeting, is just if we could schedule some time with the appropriate members of the board and the staff, and I could bring together some of those local experts to look at the language and maybe come up with some ideas to make sure there's no unintended consequences that come about from entering into that agreement.
Gideon, let me find out who that would be, because we just passed that 2 weeks ago. So, if you could.
At Ana. Not here. That's at Ana.
Okay, all right. I've got the phone number here. So, let me find out the village, and then we'll get a hold of you either tomorrow or Friday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's it for the public comment. All right, for the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. If there is a motion to approve the following items. The accounts payable for the period of March 1st through March 21st, 2019, in the amount of $1,346,399.40. Okay. Pay estimate number 4 from Austin Tyler Construction, Inc., for the Finnegan Creek Sanitary Sewer Project in the amount of $211,408.95. Pay estimate number 5 from Austin Tyler Construction, Inc. for the Finnegan Creek Sanitary Sewer Project in the amount of $133,024.14. And the Treasurer's Report of Cash and Investments for the period ending February 28th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
I just have one question before we make a motion. Is the $1,346,399.40, does that include the $13,432 that we're going to put on a separate motion? Do we need to make that less than
Yes.
that number?
Yes, it does.
Should we make that motion 1.346,399.40 less $13,432.50?
With that question, I don't know why it would have been listed separately.
Well, the schedule of accounts payable includes bills with the check date of tomorrow. So they assume it's going through consent agenda and will be approved. So the legal bill is part of the schedule of accounts payable. So I think you probably should amend that amount, and then you're going to vote on the next, the legal bill separately.
That's my understanding.
So do you want me to motion it that way? Or, I mean, to make that it's consent agenda?
Is it not maybe overcomplicating it if we're gonna,
Well, we're going to,
conceivably approve it in 1 minute?
it probably is overcomplicating it, but that's kind of to the letter of it. You know, we're approving it twice. If we approve the payables.
You're right.
You don't want to pay me twice?
All right.
Can't we just make it to be inclusive of H2?
Yeah, at this point, I didn't know that was included, so I mean, I think that if the motion to approve that as part of.
Otherwise, I can give you the new number if you like it.
No, we can include it in there. We'll just re-motion it. The number 2 is in there. The January 2019 Mahoney Silverman and Cross LLC legal bills in the amount of $13,432.50 will be included in the $1,346,399.40. So now do we have
Nice.
Mr. DiCaprio,
A second.
Mr. Rogers, any other discussion? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Trustee Barry.
Aye.
Trustee Gray.
Aye.
Trustee Caprio.
Aye.
Trustee Rogers.
Aye.
Trustee Sweet.
Aye.
Carries. Legislation and action items. No, we just did it, I just did include it. Okay, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 19-009, an ordinance approving a development agreement, DA, between Village of Homer Glen and Oak Creek Development Partners, LLC, for the square at Goodies Grove?
So moved.
Trustee Gray, Trustee Burrian, discussion. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Caprio.
Aye.
Trustee Sweet.
Aye.
Trustee Rogers.
Aye.
Trustee Barry.
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Trustee Gray.
Aye.
Motion carries. 2, 19-010. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 19-010, an ordinance approving the final plat of subdivision for the proposed square of Goodings Grove subdivision located east of South Bell Road and south of Glengarry Drive, in Homer Glen, Illinois, subject to the applicant posting all required financial guarantees for public improvements prior to recording of the final plat?
I so move.
Trustee Caprio,
A second.
Trustee Rogers, discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trustee.
Aye.
Now, I do appreciate you using the same type of streetlights that we have at Heritage Park because I think that's going to look very attractive.
Yeah, they're very pretty lights, very expensive lights.
I do appreciate that. And I think it'll look real nice. The other thing I was wondering, because of, there's 4 units, 3 units, and they're pretty close to, what type of, it's not part of an ordinance, but what type of lighting are you using, like if are their garages gonna be lit, or the?
There'll be coach lights next to
But
the
it's gonna
garage.
be shielded type of lighting? Because, you know, so the light trespass
I'd
for other
I'd
people.
have to check with MI what coach light they're gonna have on the garages, but I can get that answer for you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just, I was just curious. Thank you.
They don't need to be shielded though, correct?
It's
By
not
ordinance, it's
necessary,
not on
no.
residents, right?
No, that's what I said, by ordinance, it's not
I wasn't
necessary.
sure that you understood it.
Right, it's not necessary, but I think it will, you know, since there's 3 and 4 units so close together, I think it would help with like trespass, you know, with your neighbor. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Trustee Marion?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Capper?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 19-011? An ordinance approving and adopting the official 2019 zoning map of the Village of Homer Glen. It is understood that this adoption includes map amendments and annexations approved over the course of 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Varian, discussion?
Hold on. Can you wait just 1 second, Dan?
Sure.
I just had a quick question. When I was looking at the zoning map from 2018 versus 2019, I noticed some of the colors, that, like if you wanted to compare, why did they change the colors for the same type of zoning? So like if you wanted to compare or look at one map to another, it's confusing.
That was done on purpose, because in the previous version, the colors were so close, it's kind of hard to differentiate between commercial and residential zoning. So we made it, the consultant made it very clear, and for the first time, you can actually see on the map the actual zoning districts and all the street names, so it's much more detailed and clearer than before.
Yeah, well, the street names, that the details help, right? I was just curious about coloring. Thank you.
Any other questions? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy
Aye.
Trustee Marion?
Aye.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Capper?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 4, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 19-008, an ordinance governing illicit discharge detection and elimination required by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency as part of the Village of Homer Glen's municipal separate storm sewer system, MS4, stormwater MPDES permit?
So moved.
Trustee Gray,
I'll second.
Trustee Solis, discussion?
Mayor, we discussed this at Public Safety and Service, maybe Director Salmovich can fill us all in on what it is.
Yes, basically, the Illinois EPA requires all communities meeting a certain criteria to be part of what they call their MS4 permitting. So it's municipal separate storm sewer system permitting. And basically what it is it's a program of basically permitting requirements for discharges, making sure that we're going to be monitoring on behalf of the EPA, that we're responsible for monitoring any discharges into the creeks. So this includes anything from just the typical erosion control issues from construction sites, illicit discharges, which is what this ordinance basically covers, which would be anybody dumping any kind of oils, antifreeze, things of that nature, into storm sewers, into the roadside ditches, things of that nature, that ultimately make their way into the creeks. So what this ordinance does is, first of all, it's a standard ordinance that is required by all MS4 communities, and all MS4 communities are required to adopt this ordinance. And basically what it is doing is giving us extra kind of authority and inspection, but also fine capabilities, so that if we are finding anybody that is doing any kind of illicit discharges, that those responsible, that the village can find those responsible, and if necessary, close access to our system until the situation is corrected. So, and like I said, that it's a standard ordinance, and that's pretty much one of the steps that's required by the Village of Homer Glen in order to be an MS4 community. And at the next, I believe at the next board meeting, we're going to be having a presentation which will kind of explain a little bit further what the whole MS4 permitting is, what the requirements are, and kind of what the village's role in that permitting is.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Gabriel?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, is there a motion to approve a contract with HR Green for design and construction engineering services for the 2019 Drainage Improvement Program? I so move. Trustee Caprio?
I'll say.
Sorry. Trustee Rogers?
No, it was Friday.
No short list.
Well, I didn't say sorry, so I figured it was Trustee Burden. Okay. Discussion.
So this was another one we talked about at Public Safety, I know, and I specifically asked Director Solomovich if HR Green understood the scope of what they were bidding on, considering the disparity in those numbers, and he assured me that they did understand what they represent, and it's probably from a comfort with the village, knowing a lot of the projects that are already going on.
Correct. Some of the studies that actually went into preparing the request for proposals, they had actually performed those studies. So I think, just working with the village over the last several years, working with the Township Highway Department, doing their engineering projects, I think they have a good understanding of what our issues are.
Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Nancy?
Aye.
Trustee Barry?
Aye.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve a service agreement with iWork, WORQ, Systems for Community Development Software in the amount not to exceed $15,500?
I so move.
Trustee Caprio?
Second.
Trustee Gray? Discussion?
I just want to make a comment that I think it's great that we're moving towards the software, helping us maintain the tree line system and everything, and working intergovernmentally with the road district, because they use the same software, if I'm not mistaken. And it helps us to work closely with them to manage these things. So I just think it's a positive move.
And I'd like to ask one question. Do we know why the setup, training, data conversion was knocked down from $10,000 to $500? That's not going to come back in the future.
No, that was a discount that they built into it. With us working the last couple months, they kind of use that as a bargaining chip as it, but that's, we managed to extend that through the date, so that'll be $500 for the setup.
Good. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Nancy?
Aye.
Trustee Barry?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is workshop item, presentation by Finance Director John Sawyers of beginning May 1st, 2019 and ending April 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Mayor. We have the budget for fiscal '20. It's in balance with a sizable surplus in the general fund, and all of the initiatives that were requested of staff and trustees are included in this budget. So we've got a terrific start. We still have the same 9 funds as we've always had. I wanted to point out the total for the projected revenues is $14.3 million versus expenses of $21.7 million. The reason for the disparity is because 7 of those 9 funds are capital project related, which means they build up funds over time and they spend them down. Obviously not in the same period, so you get that disparity. The single most important fund for measuring the annual performance is the general fund. And the draft that you have is the one that was prepared about a week and a half ago. There's been no changes on it. it did report a surplus of about 106,000. The number for the public safety, the sheriff's contract at that point in time was $4.1 million. Lieutenant Holly and I were anticipating a small increase over last year, but just recently, the Will County internal auditor had released the number for next year, for this budget year, and it went down $300,000, 5% reduction in public safety expense. So that expense number of $9.4 million in the general fund is actually overstated by $300,000, and as well as our surplus. So it's actually overstated by $200,000. So we have a terrific start. The only thing that's changed in the funds is I removed EAD referencing on the tree replacement fund, since that's really old. It's out of date. This is a pie chart. Just represents the revenues for all 9 funds. The percentages are pretty comparable. The trends very well compared to previous years. The general fund, debt service fund, it really represents the home rule sales tax. So if you look at those two together, that's the lion's share of our revenues, which is the sales tax, income tax, and home rule sales tax. Represents 80% of the revenues. Expenditures, there again, that one doesn't really compare well with previous years because of the high concentration of capital projects. So to start with the general fund, I did make a pretty big assumption here in that we are anticipating a large surplus for this particular fiscal year ending April 30 of 19. Over approximately $700,000 surplus, and our history has been to do an equity transfer or a sweep of that surplus to a capital project fund or a park fund. It's within our accounting policy guidelines, and we would still be above the maximum fund balance listed in there. So that opening balance in the general fund of $4.9 million, includes a $650,000 sweep or equity transfer to the Park and Recreation Fund. And of course, if we don't do anything different, we will end the year with $5.2 million in the general fund, well ahead of the 6-month reserve. This is just a schedule of the revenues that the general fund has. Sales tax, most of the revenues were up this year, in particular the sales tax and the income tax. And of course, line 3 on there is the road and bridge levy, which we get from the Will County Treasurer's Office, and then we in turn turn it back to the highway district. It's a pass-through. An interesting thing on the revenue schedule is interest income. With the Fed's increasing rates 9 times in the last 2 years, we've had an increase of almost 500% in interest income. It used to be $25,000. For fiscal 19, we were at $120,000, and we're also forecasting another $120,000 for next year. The Feds came out today and said they're not going to raise rates for the remainder of the year, so that 120 should be a pretty solid number. That just represents this chart represents the composition of revenues in the general fund. We do rely on sales tax here. State income tax is a pretty sizable number. And of course it's a little distorted because the road and bridge levy comes in and goes out. It's a wash. But overall, those percents are pretty comparable with the previous year. This is why we're generating surpluses. You can see sales taxes are going up every year. This year's budget, I factored in a 2.25% COLA, which has been a common trend. We've been able to meet or exceed our projections in the past, so I don't see why we wouldn't do that in the future. Income tax is recovering from a couple years back. The IML is forecasting a sizable increase for next year, which is great. Actually, income tax, use tax, and motor fuel tax are per capita taxes, and I use the Illinois Municipal League's cost factors for that. I haven't made any consideration in the budget for the 2020 census that's coming up. Chances are that the census won't be certified in the next fiscal year, but probably soon thereafter. Hopefully we'll see a little rise in the population in relation to the overall state. So I wanted to point out, as far as compiling the budget, we have about 8 different departments and well over 100 line items of expenses. So what I do is we take all the budget initiatives and we make those adjustments, and then we take into consideration the trend analysis. So you can see public safety is projected at 4.2. We recently became aware that that number is going to be $300,000 lower. Another really good factor for the village is line item 5, sales tax incentive agreements. We had our Town Square was paid off December of 17, I believe. This next budget year will be the last payment for the Myers sales tax incentive agreement, which is a $270,000 savings going forward. And the year after that will be the last payment for the Menards sales tax incentive, which is a $175,000 savings. Just outstanding, great timing. We did rebudget contingency of $200,000. We typically do that. We've been fortunate not to use that in the past. That also is why we end up with surpluses. And we'll expand on the capital outlay a little bit when we go through the initiatives of the general fund. Those are the three, well, the two largest areas in the general fund are the sheriff and the public safety, both intergovernmental agreements. So here's a list of the initiatives in the general fund. It's pretty lengthy. We're trying to provide detail because aside from this, the rest of the budget is just trended data. So as I mentioned, I did assume that we would transfer the surplus. So the general fund balance has been reduced by $650, and the park fund has been increased by $650 as of May 1. Item 2 is the sheriff's contract that we found out that we actually went down 5%. We rebudgeted $20,000 for additional patrol services. We didn't use any of that last year, but we did rebudget that. We budgeted to continue with the road and bridge maintenance service agreement. That's $1.38 million. It's a pass-through. Item 5 is the underground utility location. We picked that up from the road district a couple of years ago. It's down. We anticipated that to be around $90,000 in the first couple of years, but it actually trends considerably lower than that. And then I had mentioned about the incentive agreements, so we'll see a nice reduction in that going forward. The item 7 is a rebudgeting of strategic planning initiatives consulting services. We budgeted $105 this year. We used a little bit of it, and so we're rebudgeting that amount for this coming budget year. Item 8 is also a rebudget of about $54,000 for mosquito abatement, 5 applications. And of course, we budgeted continued economic development promotions, commitment to staff. Items 11 and 12 represent 2 staff members. One is a kind of a hybrid, each for communications and special events. And the other one would be an administrative assistant for all of the departments that are sitting over there, basically. They don't really have one, which is amazing. They're doing all their own memos and everything, filing. Item 13 is, there's quite an initiative for signs. We had $30,000 in the general fund for gateway signs, village hall signs, and some entry signs. There's some more signage items budgeted in the motor fuel tax fund for wayfinding signs, and also in the capital project fund for a monument sign. Item 14 is the software you just approved, and item 15 is, I know that this has been a hot topic at the Admin and Finance Committee meetings. EMA is bursting at the seams at their facility, so we doubled the rent, doubled the expense for rent, so look to add some storage over there. not only for EMA, but for also village needs. And then 16 is to replace one of the village cars, admit cars. It's not in service right now. Item 17 is for a replacement of a burial truck. And then item 18 is special events is growing, and their funding needs are growing with that. So we factored in an equity transfer of $40,000 from the general fund to the special event fund. Special event fund is really just a restricted general fund. It's just switching pockets. It's really all it's doing. And then I mentioned we rebudgeted $200,000 for the contingency. Any questions on the general fund?
On number 7, did you say 105 or is it supposed to be 150?
It's 150. The comprehensive plan came in at 105. There's a couple added agreements that the board could add on if they want. Okay?
Thank you. I do have a question. For the new position for the special events and event planning, my recollection is when I had asked about that, it was dropped. So it got brought back forward, I'm assuming, to budget for that. What is the budget amount for that position?
I think it was, well, with the communication side of it, I believe it was about $50,000, and it was split between the general fund and the special event fund. I believe the special event fund was budgeted to pick up $20,000 of that amount.
How about the next item, item 12, the administrative assistant? Do we have a number?
45,000.
And for the special events, is that full-time? Oh yeah, it's full-time. Okay.
Well, it's a hybrid position. It's a full-time position that's going to be split between the general fund. They could assist us with some of the communication needs of the village and also do some event planning too.
Can you remind me of when that got brought back forward? Because the last time I asked the previous village manager, I was told it was dropped. So I'm just curious as how it got brought back to the budget.
I was not informed of that. The interim village manager just had expressed that we would benefit from that position. As to it being dropped, that was not mentioned to me.
Okay.
So.
I know at A&F we had discussed expanding communications. In particular, I think we're sharing Lockport Public Access Channel. We could, our franchise agreement would allow us to pick up our own. This person could help feed that channel, not to mention expand on some of the other communication needs of the village. Plus, I know special events are just going to grow. That is the plan. So I wasn't aware that it was tabled or deferred. I wasn't aware.
Yeah, I actually also sent an email out to find out what the status of was it too, and didn't actually get a clear response on that either. But regardless, I was just curious because as of right now, I think how many special events do we have that that person would be partaking in? Because it wouldn't be would it be the festival too?
No, the special events that this would be pertaining to would be anything that has to do with Heritage Park.
But what's already existing? What special events are already existing? If we were to hire this person, what events would they be responsible to do for?
Whatever the board would like to plan for Heritage
So
Park.
currently, right now, we have what events? We have the Christmas lighting.
So we have approximately 10 events that Sue Stylen is in charge of handling. And it's everything from the tree lighting, to Chalk It Up, to the CNH Awards, to stargazing, to the Veterans Day events.
You said Chalk It Up, right?
Yeah. Recycling events. I'm sorry, I don't have the full list.
No, that's okay. I was just curious because, I mean,
so she's got a chunk of events, and because she has a full workload as it is, we figured that if there was a desire, which had been mentioned previously, to have additional events in Heritage Park or other parks, if the board was inclined to do that, then another person would be responsible for those activities.
I know this is a draft, so before we approve it, I'd like to see a full description of what that person would be doing.
Absolutely, and I in turn would like to just get some more feedback too. But that was the general idea of what was expressed to me back with the interim village manager.
And as far as the communication coordinator, I mean, I think the village has to have more of a presence on some of the Facebook or Instagram and things like that. I mean, committees also can use this communication as far as if this person has some graphics setting up, you know, sometimes it takes Sue with the help of Trustee Gray doing all these posters, doing flyers, doing things for the newspaper. I mean, that is what a communications coordinator, what part of that is all about.
I agree, and I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I believe in the discussion, we had recommended 2 people that I personally knew that did something in this matter and explained their job description of what they do and what a roundabout cost would be. And I was told we were going to look into that and see, because that would be a much cheaper route to do than what we're looking at here. And I provided both information, just for the feelers, just to see, instead of hiring someone else and, you know, full-time to look into something.
I was not made aware of that information.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll send you the communication back and forth.
Just a question on that position. Because it's worded special events, what certainly I've talked about is, as we're bringing some of these parks online, the need to program some of these.
Yes.
Right? It's one thing to just build facilities, it's another thing to then program it, get some co-ed rec leagues of sand volleyball and so on. Those types of things are within this position is what we're thinking,
Yes.
right? Okay, and I think the special events may be throwing off a little bit, just because it's like event-based, our Christmas lighting are, but that's what we're talking about as part of that
Yes.
job, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing that I think we're going to be more in need of come June when you bring this active core online. As I said, it's one thing to spend the money to build the facility, but if we're going to, I think maybe as we get through the budget, we can talk about some of the broader numbers, but we're a town that doesn't have a park district, right? We don't currently have a parks department, and we're taking that role that in other towns have park districts and separate taxing bodies. We're sort of agreed to take that role on here. And I view a position like that being, I think, a fairly efficient use because to add the communications on top of someone that has the background, which I'd love to see, particularly in recreation programming.
Right.
I think that's taking one job and using it for multiple uses, which is what we've been pretty good at.
Right, and I think that's great too, Brian, that you brought that up too, because if we're starting off at 50,000 and we don't even have those yet, are we budgeting to give more once more and more events come out? I'm asking, what is the $50,000 for right now? Like, what would they be coming in to be doing? And I guess I just don't want someone to come in and say, okay, now we're adding all these events or all this recreation stuff, and now I want another 10, 20,000. I would just like specifics of what this person is actually doing and what their job description is.
Absolutely, and I'd like to work with the board to find out exactly what you would like this position to take on. I was just made aware that this was something that the board was interested in, and I was at ANOP and I asked for additional details, and I was told that it would be related at later time. But unfortunately, the budget is prior to that later time, so, sorry.
And I actually think, Brian, you make a really good point. Not just pigeonholing this position as just special events, but like a recreational coordinator as well, because those type of things will come online very quickly if someone is there managing them. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of open space that's going to go unused. So I think it's key to have those type of things in that job description too, even for future planning, just to make sure that we're hitting every mark versus planning as we go.
Would you rather see this position allocated to recreation as opposed to special event?
Well, that's a whole other
Because
conversation.
it is a transfer.
I think to Christina's point, we'll just get clarification on the job description to make sure we're all comfortable with what we think. We all have our, of what it includes, but I think it can include a few different things that if you can find the right person, it can be a jack of a couple trades. So.
Well, because that's like you just said, that's a whole other discussion of recreation, because what is the recreation? Are we going to have rules that only certain, you know, like the township has certain rules and only the public can use the parks at certain times, and, you know, what's the plan? So that's a whole nother discussion that we have to have on top of it, so.
Which I would say is the importance of bringing someone with that sort of background, so we're not kind of guessing ourselves, or you bring someone with a recreational background to fill that role, in my opinion, that brings that experience, they're going to help us through some of those growing pains, because it is new for us. And again, the larger discussion is when we think about that, that's going to be, we're talking about one full-time position. It's kind of our version of a park district, right? When you compare that, it's you know, we can talk about the budgets of the towns around us, which are, I think, eye-opening comparatively, and then you put the park districts on top of it, and then you look at what we're doing here from a municipal level, right? And you compare those numbers, this town should be winning awards every day for the efficient use of dollars. And just from the general fund, right? If you look at our general fund, while we're on the general fund, and I've said this before, but our general fund this year is going to have revenue of $9.5 million, right? And that's kind of the key fund. When you look at surrounding towns, New Lenox, Lockport, Lamont, most similar to us. New Lenox, Lockport, similar population within 1,000. Lamont, lower at somewhere around 16,000. All three of those have significantly higher general funds than we have, right?
We have no property tax.
And believe me, there's like three parts of this for me.
Because those are $1 million items.
So in New Lenox, you're looking at, again, 25,000 population, you're looking at a general fund over 20 million to our 9.5, right? You're in Lockport, you're looking at a general fund of over 14 million to our 9.5. And the important thing there is, you're right, all these towns levy property tax, we don't, right? So we're at 0. But, and that's the goal, and we've been really good about it. But in addition to that, on those general funds, and this is the important part on this topic, in addition to that, they have park districts on top of that as separate taxing bodies that have, I don't know, in New Lenox, the park district alone levies $3 million a year in property taxes just for the park district, on top of the village that already has double the general fund we have, same size town. Lockport, $6 million in taxes levied for the park district, all separate from Lockport City, right? And so we're doing here, as we talk about this budget and the budget in years past, we're doing here what every town around, it's not going to some town 30 miles away. Our neighbors that we're competing against, we're doing this as a municipality without a property tax. That's crazy in a great way. You know what I mean? That's a great thing that we're doing right here, and we're doing it with conservative fiscal management, but at the same time, we're investing in the future and in these types of projects, and we're going to attempt with one full-time position to kind of start a parks department in a roundabout way, and yet we're not even saying this one full-time position is just parks. We're saying, let's give it a second level with communication background. I mean, so it is. And when you look at property taxes, ours is 0, but if you take that same $300,000 home and you put it in New Lenox, on average on a $300,000 home, you're paying about $400 more a year in property taxes, right? And in Lockport, it's about $2,000 more than you're paying in Homer Glen on a $300,000 house, because of they've got the municipal tax, they've got the park districts on top of that, and we're doing it, I say we're, it's not us, it's been our predecessors, and it's been a long history of people that have managed this town well. But we're doing this, I think, as the example for what other towns should emulate. Have we had an advantage that we incorporated, right? Lots of these towns were incorporated 50, in some cases, you know, Lamont was 1800s, right? Have we had an advantage? We have, that we have been able to build this as it goes, but fantastic. And so when it comes to all of these numbers, we are so, it's not even competitive. We are leaps and bounds when it comes to efficient use of taxpayer dollars.
Can I circle back for one thing? To have your public safety expense, your single biggest line item, go down 5%, no change in service, unheard of. There's nobody in the state that that's happening with. And that's because it's a new community and we outsourced that through intergovernmental agreements, and it's incredible. What a coup for the village. Now, going forward, it probably will, because we're in a cost reimbursement mode, the officers are getting younger, we're able to make big shifts in the composition of the officers. A normal municipal police department can't do that. So we just saw a huge gain in savings. Probably going forward, we'll see the regular increase that a normal municipal police department would incur. But boy, this is the lowest it's been in over five years. That's incredible.
And John, and that's great, and you know, I think that's wonderful, but we also brought attention to that as well, as it just sat for years and no one had ever questioned that contract. And I believe that I have personally contacted Jimmy Hollidge and the sheriff myself and had asked to review that contract, and look at that, they reviewed it and noticed that there was a 5% decrease.
We're in a cost reimbursement program.
Right, but
so it costs 5% less this year because of the decline in age.
right, but what I'm saying is we brought a light to it. So
Yeah.
how do we even know that was going to even possibly happen? Is it just automatic? They just do it automatically?
As I said, whatever that costs is what they charge us. It's 1 year in arrears.
Okay, well, back to what Brian was saying about the whole big picture of everything. It's not just the parks. I mean, I'm looking at the personnel, and everybody in this room knows me and my personnel stuff. But if you look at what the actual spent for personnel and what we're budgeting for 2020, that's a big difference. So that's the point of me asking. We're putting in another full-time position at $50,000. That number just keeps going up. So I just want to know, is it just going to keep going?
I think if you look back 2 years, it's pretty comparable. We've had a lot of staffing positions that were vacant.
Yeah, I've gone back
And
4 years, and that was quite a big jump since we took office. So that's my point, is I just don't want to keep seeing this just keep going up and up and up. I wanted to, we got to pump some brakes here and have discussions, full discussions on where we're going, what we're doing, what do we want to be. And this, I'm just looking at the actual for 2018 to what we're budgeting for. I mean, it's a big number. And I'm just asking, I want more details.
We didn't have a village manager for 5 months. We were missing a assistant planner for 9 months. And you're comparing that number to next year. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
The only other point I'd make is as we're buying 100-acre parcels of land to develop in parks, and as we're adding parks and things, we're a growing town, and when you can't add a piece of property like this and not expect to add staff to, right? I mean, so I totally agree with the point, and I agree with the point on the full-time position that we need clear job descriptions and make sure, totally agree with that. But we're a growing town, and you know, it's as you add these things, you're going to have to staff.
I get that. Like you just said, I want a clear definition of what this person's doing, because I know if we say you're going to handle the 10 events that we have right now, but now we're going to add X, Y, Z, if that person comes back and says, I want ABC, you're going to hear from me again.
Totally.
That's all. Sorry for the long discussion.
I have another question on the general fund while we're on it. You had mentioned the EMA rent going up, and it looks like on page 9 it's going up from 27,000 to 60,000. And you had said that this was discussed today, no?
They're getting another building because they ran out of room. So they're not going to have one building anymore, they're going to have 2 buildings now. That's why we've been trying to talk about the one putting it on our own property to stop the rent. But they ran out of room here, they ran out of room at when we're renting one, they're going to have to get one more.
And is this because I don't know, are you expanding services from EMA, or is it just?
It's not just EMA. Part of it is parks equipment that we've accumulated. Part of it is when with the fest, the road district has been renting a building to keep all the fest equipment in, and he has been pushing me to take the fest equipment, which we don't have room for. But once the fest is over, he doesn't want it back, so we're going to have a half a building full of stuff that Mike DeVivo pays to store now, because they rent that farm building in front, and that all the fest equipment goes in there, the ticket booths and the other things that they have for the fest. So it's not just.
So why are we allocating this money to EMA? I mean, why don't we put it where it belongs? If this belongs in special events or this belongs in parks somewhere else. I mean, it's kind of it's a false number here then. You know, it makes the need for EMA for a building that you had mentioned, Mayor, about building a building, it makes that look like a false need.
It does, but they're also, it's not just being used by EMA though. Like you said.
No, that's what I'm saying. It should be, that burden should be borne by parks or by special events, and so that those are truly allocated where they belong. So.
Right, you see the true numbers going for whatever it's paying
Right.
for.
So I just like that, and again, I'm not, you know, I'm sure everybody could have a clear out and throw away stuff that is older. I've never been to EMA, so I don't know what the situation is in your current space. And if it's being burdened by other things though, by, you know, park equipment that takes care of the parks, then that portion of the rent should be borne by parks. And the same thing with the fest committee, you know, that should be borne by that.
Actually, now the EMA garage is pretty much all EMA equipment. We actually have 3 pieces of EMA equipment at the parks garage. Because we used to be able to store a few vehicles outside where we rent, and they had some activity there, so he wants no more, the owner of the property wants no more vehicles outside. There was a contractor that rented a front space, and he had 3 service trucks out there, and they were getting broke into, and a couple of the trucks got vandalized, and so he doesn't want anybody parking vehicles outside anymore, because it draws that to the buildings. It draws that problem to the buildings. So we had to move a couple pieces of equipment, which we have at the parks garage now, which makes the parks garage tighter for our equipment. So, and then like I said, with, you know, the equipment that we have at the parks garage, Mike DeVivo had gifted the village the bucket truck that they replaced. So we have that over there. And then like I said, once we get the fest equipment, we don't have room now, and then we're going to add more stuff.
Right,
so.
and we also have, in one of those line items was a new vehicle for EMA.
Well, that's a replacement.
So
of
the
an
old
existing,
vehicle.
yeah, one goes, one, yeah.
And is that generally the case, or are there
Yeah,
generally
we replace something with something. The last time EMA replaced a vehicle, we had a '99 Crown Victoria that we had purchased from Tinley Park many years ago, and we replaced it with a pickup truck that we were able to purchase a few years ago.
Well, like I said, I'm not necessarily saying that I disagree with needing the space. I'm just saying that break it down where it belongs, make those numbers go to the proper funds.
And we can do that. That should be, because we basically do know what we need and where we need it. So that shouldn't be a problem.
On that topic real quick, on the replacement vehicle, it's a 1991 F-350, right?
Yeah, it's an ambulance that Northwest Homer donated to us. It was our second EMA vehicle back when we started. And it's the work that it needs far exceeds the value of the vehicle.
So this is a retired ambulance?
Yes.
And we're replacing it, because it's $24,000. What are we replacing that F-350 with for $24,000?
Well, that's the trick. We have to try to find something, because we're not going to buy anything. We're not going to buy anything new. So we have to find something that we can purchase within the budget that will work for what we're trying to use it for. Because the ambulance is an equipment. It's an equipment truck, is what it is. It's not an ambulance.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we're starting to replace and talk about replacing some of this equipment, I know, having been there and seen the equipment, and lots of this has been inherited and may not have been what, if we were building an EMA from the beginning, the type of vehicle we would have needed, but we've inherited, and as we start to talk about replacing some of these vehicles, is it maybe time for a full assessment of what we currently have, and what is, if something is used once a year or once every 2 years versus something that's used all the time. That's just something I'd like to see take place maybe as we start. We're talking about replacing some of this equipment now. Let's have some forethought and a plan, so it's not, maybe, I think, to your earlier point in a different way, not the one-off stuff of just, everyone's ready. I'll plan on that. I'm not saying it has to be, it's not a budget discussion necessarily now, but something I think we need to do in a more holistic approach of what's the plan for the EMA equipment 10 years out and 15 years out, as opposed to someone donates it and we're not sure if we need that vehicle, but it's free and we
vehicle donated to EMA, which was the ambulance from Northwest Homer. Everything else we had to purchase.
Retired equipment from
Right.
Yeah, highway other.
Retired equipment from other places
Yeah.
that was purchased, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, did you have any other questions on that, or we're going to let John take it there?
Okay, we're going forward to the special event fund. We use the Fest Committee's budget break-even projection. I believe it was $148,000. So at the beginning of the year, we're expecting to start with about $50,000. The revenue is $148,000 from the Fest, and the equity transfer from the general fund was $40,000. That equals the total revenue transfers. And then budgeted expenses are $229,300, finishing the year at about $8,800. The expenses, as I had mentioned, is the festival budget. We have two staff. We have Sue Stylen is currently the staff liaison. $20,000 of her salary is allocated to the special event fund. We did put a place setter in there for the other position of $20,000, bringing that total up to $40,000. Heather will help put together some kind of task listing for that projected position. I rebudgeted the part-time events coordinator. It was a place setter last year, and I just rebudgeted it. And then item 4, community events and activities, is those items that Heather discussed, chalk it up, Mike Hike, the veterans thing. It's been increased by $5,000 from the previous year because we're looking to expand on those events. And then we also had budgeted for a purchase of a large tent, so we'd have to go out and rent it every time we're going to do something that's on site. So that brings the total expenditures to $229,300. Any questions on this? Well, we talked about special events. Environmental fund. What that does is it takes in the surcharge on the refuse bills. That particular portion of a bill goes specifically to the environmental fund. It's built up a surplus that's greater than the recommended maximum in the fund policy. So we are forecasting a transfer of $20,000 out of that fund over to the tree replacement fund. So we're going to start the year with $70,000. The revenue is the surcharge, and then the budgeted expenses is $68,000. That actually includes a $20,000 transfer to the tree fund. So we would finish the year with about $34,000. The expenses are $20,000 of Sue Stylen's salary is allocated to administrate the environmental fund. This year's special event is the electronic recycling. They rotate that every year. There's a new type of environmental activity event. The other items 3 through 8 are recurring in nature. It's the typical initiatives of the environmental fund. Same amounts, same tasks, nothing really new there. The grand total of the environmental fund expenses are $68,000.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you're saying Sue Stylen's salary, is this the budget? Is this in addition to her current salary? This is out of her current salary.
Correct. MFT. So we use a lot of MFT funds to do the road work out at Heritage Park. So we've seen a decline in the fund balance. We're going to start the year with about $749,000. The revenues are per capita tax, or state motor fuel tax. It's actually been declining over the years. It's down to about $616,000. We're considered a high-growth community, so we've been receiving $26,000 a year for the last 6 or 7 years. And then we're going to factor in interest income of $24,000, bringing the total projected revenues to $666,000. The expenses for the MFT fund is the right-of-way at 151st Street, right-of-way acquisition for 151st Street project. It might be low. I hope not. I think Mike is. You're going to start working on that soon to try to get that going. The sooner we start on that, the more we save. We have a balance due from the road work at circle here, it's mostly retention. That's $268,000. We have the amount due from the intergovernmental agreement to the road district is $183,600. We've had that since incorporation. We rebudgeted the path, the Woodbine State path. We rebudgeted the contingency of $100,000. And then the normal expenses of MFT is the streetlight electric. I briefly talked about street signage earlier. I know that the Economic Development Committee has been looking to enhance the signage. So there's some wayfinding signs that are MFT qualified that have been budgeted. And then we have the right-of-way engineering, 30 grand. We rebudgeted the Opticom maintenance. We haven't had that, but as the 159th Street picks up, we'll start to incur that. And then the traffic signal maintenance that we pay to the Will County Highway Department. Will County Highway Department. Grand total $1,191,000. Any questions on the MFT fund?
So John, just real quickly, we have that $180,000, $183,000 for the road district.
Yes.
So that's on top of the $1.38 million, right, that we
Yes.
transferred to them from the road and bridge levy?
The premise of that is that when the village incorporated, and they took all those miles of road, the road district lost approximately $15,000 a month in motor fuel tax. So the village is replacing the township's lost motor fuel tax from taking those miles on. It hasn't changed. It's been the same amount.
So that adds to that number though, right?
Yes.
So our total number really for the road district is 1.48.
That's correct.
56 maybe, I can't find that other page. And really, that number climbs by another 1.38 million because that road and bridge levy is split with the road district, is that correct?
Well, that's correct.
That's just our half, back to them, right? They keep half. And
That's correct. They
so
levy,
pass through.
I think they levy, the road district's gonna levy $4.5 million.
Right,
Okay,
and
now
our
all
portion
that
of
amount-
that is somewhere in the 3.6 range, something like that. Our portion of it, the part that Homer Glen generates, between our 1.38 million that we've transferred to them,
Yeah.
1.38 that they collect on our behalf and they keep, and the $183,000 additional part that comes out of MFT, that's really what we spend on our road district.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. We picked up a couple more expenses over the years that they were picking up that they really didn't need to, like the underground utility searching. Julie's is new. We just picked that up a couple years ago, but we were supposed to be picking it up.
Right.
So
Animal control.
yes, yeah. So
We can take just
right, from them. Right.
classic case of a capital project fund. We've spent down a lot of the MFT because of the road work done on the Circle Drive. Oops. Park and Recreation Fund. Okay. Most of what you see in the Park and Recreation Fund is a place setter for the board's review and approval at some time later. I did mention that I did factor in a $650,000 equity transfer into the beginning of the year. That will come before the board at the first April meeting. It's very similar to the last 2 or 3 that we've done in the past. So that would bring the opening balance to $2.8 million, and the revenues are 1.9, expenses are 3.8, so we would finish the year at about 950,000. So let me go to the revenues are 3-cent local motor fuel tax, which we're seeing some recovery on it. Actually, the first year we had it, in 16, it was 680,000. And last year it dropped down to 600. We're starting to see that pick up again, especially with the 159th Street project picking up. A big item in here, and we discussed this a couple months ago, the debt service fund, which is it collects the home rule sales tax and it pays the debt. The fund accounting policy says that if the home rule sales tax is more than $2 million per year, which it is, and has a balance in excess of $1 million after the December 1st bond and interest payment is made, that excess can be transferred. The measure on December 1st of 18 was $2.2 million, which means the board could transfer $1.2 million to a capital project fund from the debt service fund. And then item 3 is just your developer park contributions. Item 4 is a rebudget of a grant, and then there's the interest income. So the expenses forecasted, which primarily are place setters, are, the first one is, we had also mentioned at that same meeting, there would be $2 million that the village could afford to fund for Phase 3 park improvements. If the village were to do that, the engineering costs or the professional fees on that would be $136,000. There is currently $750,000 of the active core remaining that's going to be funded between now and the next couple of months. The board approved the master plan for Heritage Park a couple of meetings ago. That's $72,000. We put in a place setter for small park project of $200,000. Don't really know what it is, it's just a place setter. And then the personnel expenditures, which is really to maintain the park and trail system, is $321,000. Don't forget, we were paying that out in contractor fees in years past. And then we have maintenance costs of $144,000. The park fund is forecasting a couple capital outlay items, snowplow, attachment, UTV, tractor, total cost $86,000. We're going to rebudget the Herald's Trail development of $30,000, and then the supplies and materials of $27,000, and then just the utilities make up the balance for a grand total of $3.8 million. Any questions on the park fund?
Of course, I have something. So can you go back to the other slide where it said, for smaller parks, is it under $200,000?
Yes.
So, my Parks Committee, my Invest Parks Committee has been discussing, a schedule for other parks that may need to be, looked at in our village. Parks that don't even exist yet. They want, certain subdivisions or, want us to put, a placeholder in, like Glen Walk Estates. The residents are, have been coming to every meeting discussing like that they need a park, and I know John Robinson is going to look at, the cost of what a park would be. We already have a lot purchased there, and we're looking at the cost of putting a park on that already purchased lot. I believe it would excess over $200,000 for something of that nature. Am I right, John? Or?
Yeah, probably.
So, not that I'm saying that I want to spend money or anything like that, but if that's what the budgeted amount is there any way to increase that but decrease somewhere else, or because?
Well, remember the fund balance was 800,000 or 950,000. So if we increased it by 100,000, made it 300, that would mean the ending cash and investment balance would be 850,000.
Can you just replace over the numbers, and number 1 instead of $2 million becomes 1.8, and the other one goes up by $200,000? Does that have the same effect?
Oh, certainly.
Are all of these numbered items
true.
onto the park expenditures? If you put $2 million in the Heritage Park and 200,000 into the small park improvements, does that mean we cannot exceed those, or are these interchangeable within this fund?
Those are place setters. So what you're suggesting is, item 1 here is that we would reduce that to 1.9 million. That would also reduce line item 2 by a little bit, and then we could increase that net reduction. We could increase the park improvement on line 5 there, and that would.
That's still all predicated on us transferring in the $1.2 million in excess.
That's correct. Yes. And with equity transfers, they're never done. I don't do them until the 4th quarter. I typically don't, because you may not do this, which means you don't need the 1.2 million. We would wait as long as we could to make an equity transfer. It's a place setter as well as some of these big items on here. Because it's going to require board approval. Most of these items are all board approval related.
So I'm sorry, but I remember, I think it was like the December 12th meeting, or maybe the February 12th meeting, I'm not really sure. But we talked about the funds that we would have for the park, and this is saying the expenditures would be 3.8 million. But I thought the funds available were only like 2.
Well, no, we said that we could do $2 million of phase 3 improvements, not including professional fees. And I gave you a proposal on how that would be funded with those 2 equity transfers. So since that point in time, we added the park, small park on there, because I had a feeling that was going to be needed.
As we go through the budget, I'm sorry.
No.
As we go through the budget in general, it's clear to me that some of this is taken with some of the forethought of the strategic plan and many of the goals we've laid out as we go forward, and the parks plan and an updated parks plan, and talking about, I know Parks Committee's been talking about the identifying the need and having a plan for future parks. It seems to me in multiple categories in this budget, that strategic plan, which is still, we've formally passed it, but still in its infancy of starting to implement, is reflected in this budget. Is it fair to say that
Yes.
those have been taken into account as we put this budget together?
Yes, it is early on in the process, but yes, indeed. So because they're place setters, we're looking for your input on where to go. They still need work.
Right.
It's a little easier once the first step is done. This is really the first step. The second's much bigger, which is agreeing upon what you want to do and who's going to do it. And
I just have a fear if we spend, if this is what we're budgeted and this is what, we're expecting to have come in, and we're left with $950,000, how are we going to recoup any more funds for the following year to keep going and keeping more parks going, or pump the brakes on the parks, or maintain the park? How are we going to build if we deplete everything we have?
well, right now you have $400,000 projected surplus for fiscal 20 in the general fund. That would probably sweep over, as just like the 650 is projected to sweep over this year, as well as the 600,000 from the previous year. You have your home rule sales tax is currently locked down for debt service. It's up for refinancing December 1st. That's $2.7 million that's reserved for a $2 million expense. There's a $700,000 home rule sales tax surplus that builds up every year. That's where this $1.2 million is coming from. There's funds that are the Park and Recreation Fund has 2 designated revenue streams, way ahead of the Capital Project Fund. It has the local motor fuel tax and it has developer park contributions. That will be sufficient to fund the maintenance of the park and trail systems, and maybe $100 or $200 excess. So we're going to always have the funding needs for big development in the Park and Recreation Fund. But there is a revenue that funds the Park and Recreation Department, which is good.
Just to clarify, the 650 sweep is that is from what we budgeted last year for active core, and the difference between what that project is now projected?
It's the remaining portion of active core. As Matt was saying earlier, the asphalt plant's closed, and once that picks back up, they'll finish the active core portion of that, and we'll get billed for it.
Yeah, we had active core budgeted for 3. Yeah, it was over 3.
Yeah, remember there's professional fees that go in there too then, so it's 3.3 plus another $250K. So, and I know it came in a lot lower, but don't forget the professional fees was a couple $100,000 too.
Well, we're in the last 2.5 months of that project, or
Right.
unforeseen weather or asphalt plant issues. But the bulk of that project is done, and we have a pretty firm idea of what that project's going to cost, and we think that's going to now be in that 2.5 range.
Yes. The 650 is actually coming from the retention and the remaining invoices. That's a solid number. That's unless something bad happens out there, that's a solid number.
But active core, we were over 3 in budgeted, and we think now, 2.5 months out from with that project 80% completed, somewhere around 2.5.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so you're seeing that fallout is in the opening fund balance, which was the 2 million.
Yeah.
So, I know this is a difficult one because they're big numbers, so I just wanted to stress any kind of future endeavors will require board action. They're merely place setters, and if it's okay, I could re-characterize $100,000 of that line item 1 and bring it down to small parks.
I mean, do we have any more endeavors on the horizon that I just feel like if we're dumping all this money into just a park, is there anything else that we're missing that this money can be dispersed to? If it's 1.2 million that we're just dumping it all into the park, is there any other unforeseen circumstances that another capital project might come up or something else? Is there anything else that I'm just not thinking of?
I think the next big one will be 151st, but I was talking to Mike today, and that's a couple years out. And we're going to probably pay 20% of that.
We still have some flooding problems here.
Well, flooding is in the bond fund, so we'll get to that.
Keep pulling money out of the bond fund.
Yes. So that's
But that's the 1.2 million, correct?
No.
No. How much is that?
no. Well, the bond fund, I think, opens the year with 9 million and is forecasted to end the year with 5 million. Shall I go on?
I have one question about the trail. We have $30,000 in there, and the graphic we have highlights the bike trail going from Old Oak up to Goodings Grove School. Didn't we do that?
That might be an old photo.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry. That's my fault. Matt was helping me with it. We probably just brought it forward. My bad there. I'm
We
sorry.
accept your resignation.
But we do have money in there to do possible other extensions if we can find an opportunity.
Yeah, especially if they're funded, especially if we're getting, a lot of those trails are what, 80% funded. So we never turn our back on that.
Sure.
There's a capital project fund that's got $1 million in it, and not a lot of initiatives targeted towards it, which could be also a funding source for something that came up where there was a big grant match that we had to come up with.
I believe the 30,002 was for phase 1 engineering for the next phase, and I know in the past the next phase that they were looking at, and this is something that obviously the Parks Committee could decide, but one of the next phases we were always looking at was going further west with the bike trail. Nowadays, the grants, in order to be eligible for the grant, you have to have the phase 1 study completed. So the 30,000 was for the next, whatever the next phase that we would go, it would be for the 30,000 to do the phase 1.
The phase 1 stuff.
Correct.
A lot of it requires shovel ready now too, right? So you want to get that phase 1 done.
Correct.
Okay, debt service fund is really our home rule sales tax and our 2012 bond issue. We're going to start the year with $3.3 million. As I mentioned, this fund has been growing in increments of $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year because our debt service is $2 million and our home rule sales tax has grown from 2.4. It's currently forecasted at about $2.7 million. So even with this equity transfer, it would end the year, May 1st of 20, with $2.9 million of fund balance. Another good thing for the village this year is that it's up for refinancing on December 1st. The current bond market would probably provide a $200,000 savings on the refi. So that's under current market conditions. The three years left on the bond have a 5% coupon rate, so I get calls quite a bit on analysts trying to refinance the bonds. We can't do it until December 1st, though.
And we'll be getting more, we'll be capturing and keeping more money in that fund as we exhaust those tax incentives we have with Meyer and with
That's correct. Well, that'd be in the general fund.
Right, so you said one of those is, expires next year.
The Meyer agreement expires next year. That'll be $270,000 savings, meaning the savings will be for fiscal 20. Sorry, fiscal 21.
That's paid out of this fund?
No. So.
And Menards is the following year?
Menards the following year, which is $175,000 savings. So we would have one incentive agreement left that really doesn't have a lot of cash flow. It's not real large. The background on this is the 2012 bond issue that generated $17.4 million for the village. It was a $15.4 million bond issue that was sold at a premium to get that excess funds. I'll jump ahead to that because it's the Capital Project Bond Fund. It's going to have $9.8 million to start the year. We can only spend it on 159th Street project, stormwater, the water acquisition project. So it's probably going to be around for a little while. We did forecast about $1.8 million in there for stormwater work, which I believe is coming to the board. It hasn't been out yet, but it was what you approved for HR Green. The bond fund is going to realize some money for the 319 EPA grant portion of the Heritage Park. Interest income, because of the sizable fund balance, is projected at $175,000. We have the balance of the 159th Street Road, which is going to be payable to IDOT. And we have the sewer main, balance on the sewer main project, the water main project. We have $80,000 budgeted for a monument sign in there. As I mentioned, stormwater work. Mike had mentioned the MS4 permitting. We're going to have to reduce that $72,500 down to $30,000 because the GIS stormwater atlas is included in there twice. So we're going to actually reduce those expenses by $30,000 or $40,000. So I wanted to kind of go into that one because it's really the cousin of the debt service fund. Oops, hold on a second. So the other capital project fund, which got its funds from the home rule sales tax sweeps over time, has a balance of $1 million in it. The only initiatives that are tagged to that are the streetlight retrofit, so the Farmview lift station maintenance, an access road with the Jewel Menards property, and a contingency of 50. So we really, it's a nice little piggy bank on the side in case we need to fund some, in particular, grant-funded projects. If we need to come up with a big match, this would be the first one we go to. It does not have a designated revenue stream. What you have is what you know, that's it. So it has forecasted expenses of $260,000, and at the end of the year, we'll have $776,000 in it. Any questions on capital project fund? So the last fund I have is the tree replacement fund. Starts the year at $293,000. The revenues are the $20,000 from the environmental fund that we talked about, because their fund balance is in excess of the accounting policy, a little bit of interest. And the expenses are the arborist and the annual tree replacement program. So at the end of the year, we still anticipate having $234,000 in that fund for tree replacement. So that is the budget for 2020. A lot of really good things in there, particularly sizable surplus, savings on the sheriff's contract, the 2 savings on the economic incentive. So the first draft would forecast the year to end with $15.6 million of funds.
John, did you say that surplus in the beginning is not 104, it's higher now?
It's $300,000 higher.
So that's $400,000 surplus now?
That's correct.
Which would put 16 million on hand at the end of this budget?
That's correct. Yes. That number that you hear in the treasurer's report is really misleading because, as I said, 7 of the 9 funds are capital project related. They're built up and they're spent down. We're in the spend down mode because they're high right now, in particular because of the bond fund. So you're going to see that number go down over time. The general fund is the key, is what the underwriters and the bond markets look at for financial responsibility and being a good steward of the funds. And having a fund balance that requires 6 months worth of expenses is pretty gold level. We're at 6.5 months, so it's a very good budget. All the initiatives that I received were funded, and right now, you may want to consider budgeting if you want to do something with the 400, you could do an equity transfer and transfer that out, or you can wait till next year and do it like we're proposing to do in April. So the 2 things I need to do, 3 things I need to do is I need to reduce the sheriff contract amount, I need to reduce that MS4 permitting, and I need to increase the park, small park project by $100,000. We'll also provide you with a description of the hybrid position, communications coordinator / recreation / special event. Am I missing anything?
The pro rata of the EMA building. The pro rata of the EMA.
Well, it may not be as much as you think, because there's going to be a lot of EMA equipment in there.
I just want it properly allocated,
Okay.
just so it's properly addressed, so that
Okay.
it's not
It'll-
a false accounting. So.
Right. It'll probably, okay. Okay, you can do that. So, the next board meeting, so I'll make these changes. We're going to publish a legal notice saying that this document is available for the inspection at the village and at the library. If any of the public would like to see it, we'll have a public hearing at the next meeting with these changes incorporated into it. Let the public make comments on that, and then look to get the final draft to the board at the second April meeting for their consideration.
Was this draft portion part of the packet that's put online, as our packets are now put online? Can you also put it online after you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know that the requirements are that it be available at Village Hall and at the library, but as long as we're publishing our packet anyhow, can we put the?
Certainly.
We might as well make it easy on people to, instead of having the traffic or something.
We should get a few people coming in and look at it every year. So that is the game plan with that. I hope that works out.
I mean, I know that we're looking at the 1.2 equity transfer. I mean, it's fine for now, but I'd like to talk to you more about that, just to confirm that we don't have any other issues like the flooding that George mentioned, anything that we can allocate it to, such as all dumping into the park.
Okay. Very good. That concludes my part of the budget.
Great job.
Thank you. If you have any questions, please call me or email me. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can and answer your questions.
You did an amazing job.
Well, the village is fortunate. There a lot of good things happening at the village for finance, as you can see.
Okay. We'll go to old business. Is there any old business? Nothing under new business?
Yes, Mayor, I do have something under new business. As we discussed, the mayor and I had met with a homeowner from Crystal Lake Estates subdivision, one of the homeowner association president. They've been experiencing for a number of years, maybe a decade, the mayor can certainly speak to that, he was on the board back then, about traffic issues along Crystal Lake Drive. And they had requested stop signs at a couple locations, and when we met with the homeowner association president, he presented to us, he showed us the petition that he had circulated showing 80% of the homeowners in there requesting these and approving them. And like I said, we have the data from the radars and things like that that bear out that there was speeding issues there. So if the mayor and I would, the gentleman, we had said that we would bring forward a possible trial for 6 months of putting up stop signs at 2 locations, and continuing to collect data while it's out there. So, you know, we've individually spoken with many of you and just wanted to get consensus to how do we proceed to direct staff to make that happen.
Yeah, once we approve it here, we get hold of the highway department, they'll put the sign in place. There's going to be 6 signs that they're going to have to put up.
Two locations, it's a 3-way stop sign.
Right. 2 stub streets and north and south.
Yeah, it's just a two-way stop, right?
There's
Because
a stop
it
street.
sounds like there's a lot of signs because there's just 2 streets.
There's 2 streets and 2 stubs. So that's why you have the third one, because people come out with stub.
And then, do you have any more information about the possible 4-way stop at 163rd and Cedar? I know the county was out there doing a survey.
I heard just a few days ago, I can't remember if it was in the road commissioner or somebody told me that that might have been approved, so I don't know what it was, so.
I just want to listen.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I haven't gotten anything official, but word is they're gonna put a 4-way stop sign. The 4 stop signs are at an intersection, R63 and Cedar. I don't have an official document, but that's what we're being told.
Okay,
So are we in agreement to
Yeah.
go ahead and?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
so we'll get a hold of it.
Okay.
As if you would be in.
Pardon?
As if you would be in.
Yes.
All right, that's it for new business. The next item is executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session for purposes of discussing personnel, review of executive session minutes, and potential litigation?
Go ahead, Sharon.
So it's going to be trustee Gray, trustee Sweet, discussion, afterwards, we follow.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Sweet.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Varian?
Aye.
And then trustee